Do you guys talk about race within your friendship?
We do it, yeah.
Well, it may not have even been something that I thought that was important to have, because I just looked at her as like my friend and not like my black friend.
Sometimes if I don't see you as the black friend, I see you as the friend. I miss opportunities to ask about your genuine experience.
Yes, we can't walk around blindly thinking we don't see color. We're reminded of color by the time we wake up, it's the time to go to bed.
And even I remember one of your cousins at one of your parties that came up to me, but she came and she's like, oh, I'm the whitest person in here.
I think especially white women want to get it right. We were like told to be perfect. Like we're such a, there's such a experience of that when we come to the table, it's like, I'm gonna come to a space and be wrong. Right. Like, why would I do that? And that's what's hard, is working with this conversation between white women and black women, is like, the white woman would have to do enough work to be at a place where she's okay with being wrong, okay with being in a position of discomfort, okay with having conflict repair. Like, there's a whole set of skills you have to be in a place to hold the experience of someone that's been harmed by white people for so long. And it's not like our responsibility or their responsibility, but you do have to do and black women have to do a amount of work too, to be patient, there's healing that needs to happen on our own, but then there's also healing that can happen together.
Hi lovers. So I partnered with Hulu this month to promote their new show Queenie, and the concept I chose to focus on was tough but necessary conversations on race within interracial friendships. So I gathered 4 sets of friends to discuss fetishization, implicit bias, the responsibility of white families in interracial relationships, racism in the workplace, and code switching. It's a long video, so let's get to it. And I look forward to reading your comments.
After my interview with Shan and my friend Jackie, I finished the show in like a day and a half. And my biggest takeaway from it is how important a black woman's mental health is. I really recommend people to watch and read the book and the series. I just really want people to understand that we need more stories.
Big batty Queenie. It's been a while, innit? Where you been? I ain't seen you in the ends for a long time.
I moved. Live with my boyfriend now.
Boyfriend, yeah.
How's your wife?
It's complicated.
Sure it is. See you later.
Hey, Queenie, you got my number, innit? Call me when you're ready. I know you're a good girl waiting to turn bad.
Do you feel like that's like totally normal to kind of encounter a non-black person speaking to you that way, even if it's not like a guy hitting on you? They have to like comment about the way you look, like,
Yeah, I mean, if it's not the body, it's definitely the hair, for
like,
sure, right. For sure, yeah, the hair thing, I mean, yeah, annoying.
Yeah.
Even with the online dating part, where it's which is why I don't have any of those apps right now. But yeah, it's just frustrating.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the thing that I say to you is the first thing I think when I see like a guy on a dating app or whatever? What's my like first question?
I think you always ask, like, does he really like black women? Like, does he date black women regularly, or is this just like tokenizing you?
That's literally like one of my very first questions. Anyone I meet, it doesn't even matter their race, black, white, anything. My first question is, does he like black women? And I mean genuinely like, or is it fetishization? If she recommends someone to me, my first thought, even if I don't say it out loud, my first thought is, does he like black women? Mm-hmm. That's a reality in dating for me, because this happens, like,
Is there anything you can do? Is there anything anybody can do?
I mean, and that's a question I've been actually asking myself a lot lately, and I think it has to do with spaces, where I'm looking and what I'm looking at, and I haven't seemed to have found those spaces yet, but I think that's what it is. I think it's, there has to be a safe space where black women can look and find men that are genuinely interested in them. I don't know where it is yet, but I think it's among other people. That's what my thought is. I think it's going to be through friends. I think if she says, hey, I met this guy, I think he'd be perfect for you, I know that she's kind of already screened him. to know that, like, you know, it's genuine. Or if he's with her, hopefully, she'll scream the ones I bring too. But, you know, if she's with friends and it's one of her friends, I can know that, okay, this might be somebody that is, you know, kind of sanctified, if you will. I think that's what it's going to be, because I don't know that you can just find that safety online. And again, it's not just, I mean, it's interesting that it was a Pakistani guy in there, because again, it's not just white men, it's also black men. It's all kinds of men. Is, you know, there are a lot of unpure intentions out there, I think, and I think we see them more than a lot of other types of women do.
And I feel like also there's that standard where Black beauty only applies if we have enhancements. Natural, full body women like myself, and I put myself next to Jackie, guarantee you guys are going to go flock to you first, then the Black girl, unfortunately. You know, and it's kind of fucked up. Pardon my language. It's fucked up in society that we have these standards of beauty and we can't embrace all bodies, all colors, whatever it may be.
Do you have a conversation about that as friends?
No, I mean, I guess we're having it now.
Yeah,
one thing I've always really appreciated about you in general, like since I've known you, is how you are so expressive with your style and who you are, and you've changed your hair a bunch of times. You like have changed your style. Like, you're always willing to just be like, this is me. If you don't like it, that's really not my problem. And you never try to change yourself to fit in with any beauty standards or beauty norms. And that's something that I really appreciate about you. Now, did we ever have a conversation, or did I know that you felt like, oh, if me and you were walking down the street together, that guys would look at me first? No, like I would have never even, like, that would have never crossed my mind, because in my mind, I'm like, well, some guys, you're gonna be their preference, you're their cup of tea, and some guys, I'm gonna be their cup of tea. But to hear it from you like that, it's like kind of eye-opening. Like,
Yeah, but
damn.
when one brand of tea gets all the commercials,
Yeah.
and the other never does, or gets, if anything, slander campaigns, then it's not just a matter of like which cup of tea is
it's not like a matter of
subjectively preference, right?
Yeah,
It's-
exactly. That's how I would have like viewed that, you know. So like these conversations are really important, because obviously my experience in life is very different than yours in so many ways. So I've never had to deal with that. I have had people, sure, touch me without my consent plenty of times. So that just goes with being a woman, unfortunately, in the society. But it's never crossed my mind of like, they're touching me for a reason because it's like they're fetishizing me. No, it was never like that. So to hear it from you, it's more of like, oh, let me touch your hair because it's so different than mine. That puts you in this box. Of like, you are not like us. You can't sit with us, but I want to play with you for a second, you know? So that's definitely like very eye-opening.
Oh my God, is it real?
What the fuck do you think you're doing?
Wouldn't it be nice for fuck's sake?
There's a common trope actually for Black women, that they are the mammy, the Jezebel, or the why am I forgetting? Mammy, Jezebel, or the Sapphire. And those three tropes basically say you're either submissive, you're sexy, or you're sassy. Outside of that, you don't have existence. You're subhuman or superhuman. And I feel like for Black women, this is a very common experience. I was told at a very young age, you're pretty for a Black girl, you're an African princess. It's some categorization of you as a Black woman, you know, within your little kingdom, this is what you are. And then it's covered and laced in like a compliment or some kind of, you know, but you're attractive. That's why I'm saying this. Are you ready to turn bad? Or your butt is so big, like this is a good thing. And that's where what is commonly called a microaggression, or the idea that like I had a good intention, but the impact was bad, I just firmly reject. I think that what we're seeing is more of a dignity violation. You are literally violating her personhood by touching her without her consent, by speaking to her that way out of her name, and really just emphasizing what the world emphasizes, that Black women are to be seen and not heard, right? Like our place is just to be objects, to kind of bring it full circle. And sadly, it's very familiar. This is an experience from the club, not a white woman, that has never happened to me, but being touched in a club, being on dating apps and being told disrespectful things or getting overly sexual advances that I think were really specific to Blackness. I don't think that I know that every woman gets obscene pictures and I think that's patriarchy, but there's a specific vitriol or specific kind of hatred I think that exists for Black women. At the same time, they still love Black women.
Hefty. Hefty? Is this what single people are saying these days? Does the chocolate thing ever work on Black girls? It's highly unlikely that I'll be giving head to a stranger. That feels decidedly racist.
I think, even for me, because I'm an ambiguous Black woman, watching the experience of a non-ambiguous Black woman, I'm like, does that really happen?
I know.
That just and when you talk and you ask and you're curious, you're like, yes, I can't believe that people message and say, do you taste like chocolate? That seems ridiculous, but that's
real.
Yeah.
That's where I have, I'm so grateful for the Black women in my life because it's been heartbreaking, but I've been able to see in real time stuff like that happen. And you're like, oh, they do ask to touch your hair. They do. It's crazy. Because before, if I wasn't in deep relationships with Black women, I'd see that and be like, no one does that. I don't know, maybe I wouldn't, but I'd be like, no one does that. And now I'm like, oh yeah, it's been crazy to see over time, the stuff people say, the stuff people do, how people act. And it just is so heartbreaking because it is that, it's like, it's not my experience, but it does feel so lonely because you're like, where do I go?
Right. That's a terrifying but very honest question.
And especially, there could be a potential where it's like, as a Black woman, you don't feel like people have heard you or responded to your pain or in the past. So you're less likely to report things that happen on dating apps. So you're less likely to report things that happen. So it's also that too, there might be fear where you're no one's going to listen to me. No one cares about what happens, and so it just makes it even harder to be on the apps and feel like you're safe or feel like people are going to listen to you or care for you.
We took a picture of our outfits today, and I was like, I'm feeling kind of bloated. I don't feel cute, even though my man's gonna always say you look good. It's it's validating when you hear it from your friends, especially friends when you're not sleeping. Because that's what it is. And I love how you've never made me feel uncomfortable. You've made me feel seen, comfortable enough to go out in my outfits. And thank you for, saying that I dress my own style because, I don't like to follow fashion trends, but I also I like to feel comfortable, look comfortable, but I'm so self-conscious, it's crazy, like the next chick. But it's nice and validating to have friends that make you feel like the baddest bitch in the room.
It doesn't come off that way to the outside that you're self-conscious unless you tell me hey, I feel bloated today. I don't think I've ever heard you once say anything like that. I look at you or how I viewed you, how you come across on the outside is you are confident. You do not give a fuck. You don't, and that's really eye-opening to me as well, that on the inside you may not feel like that all of the time.
Very much, very much.
And I love that you told me that you love it because, sure, I know giving a compliment is great. Who doesn't like a compliment? But hearing you say how much it means to you, means a lot to me because it validates me for actually being genuine and telling you whenever I think damn girl, look, you know what I mean? I love your outfit today or I love your hair today. Makes me feel good that you receive it from me.
Yeah, we need more protection. And I think relationships are actually the best. Friendships, people standing up for other people are the best kind of protection for these things.
Black friends and white friends don't feel safe because there's what if that happens? And I knew all the fucking time you were thinking this about me or you had this perception about me. And that's what I was that was the weirdest part to me. It was maniacal how she turned. And it was almost this turn of a knowance of because I'm white, I'll always have power over you. Oh yes, I forgot, I'm white and no matter what, I'm always gonna have power. I'm gonna be with the man or whatever the thing is. And that's what was very dark. And it reminded me too that so much of the work we can do in relationships and friendships, but there's so much ancestral, cellular knowing that we have that sometimes can be unconscious comes out in those times, which is so scary.
Yeah.
Is there a space to talk about that?
Talk about.
Is there a space to honestly say, I've been told my whole life that I'm more attractive, more worthy of love than you, and that still fucks with me?
I think, yes, I 100% think that. And maybe this is me and my whiteness. It's not conscious to me. So it's like, I think in moments it's so important to have the consciousness brought to the table. Because in my perception, I'm a white woman who's still wanting to be beautiful and still wanting to be thin to some standard that I'm still trying to achieve. But I don't have the access to the experience of being like, but you're still the standard or you're still the thing. So I think for me, it's really helpful to have that reminder of like awareness. What do you perceive?
Well, I'm challenged with this question because I think about how in recent, in the last 10 years, you see a lot of white women or non-Black women taking on Black features or attempting to appear more Black. So there was definitely when I was growing up, Eurocentric ideals for beauty, right? Certain kind of hair, slim, whatever. But I think those are changing. And the idea that almost like making your own body.
Blake Griffin calls him build a bitch.
I mean,
he's like, it's a build a bitch. You put lips on her, you put an ass on her, you put tits on her.
And so what are our standards of beauty?
Yeah.
But I think I keep going back to like whiteness is our default though. End of the day, like you can put all the Black pieces, you could have the lips, you could even have the big chunky earring. You could look like, with the braids, you could look like a Black girl. But if you're white, you still exercise that level of power, privilege, positionality that's inherent. And to your point, I think it's very, very important to talk about the epigenetic and ancestral part of this, which is a, not as popular part of the equation, but imagine 4 generations.
Yeah.
Anything can become a part of your DNA and be how you move over time. Now, how do you reverse that? Because is it the question of like bringing it to your consciousness? Whose responsibility is that? I would argue it's not, non-white people, but at the same time, how else will you be aware of these things?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if, I know that some of your work is in spirituality. I think there's a spiritual healing. I think that, at the risk of going a little bit too far, but like reparations, things that actually show that there's an acknowledgement of the power imbalance and the way things have been done, actually, I think, move us in that direction.
But I think that's why conversations like these amongst friends are so important to have it, because you don't get caught off guard. And it's not unpacking years of thoughts and repressed feelings that are not on the right side, but that are genuine to your experience, both as a white person and as a person who just lives in America, which is a white-centric society. So that's why I'm excited to have conversations like these, because it just allows that breeding ground to talk about, like growing up, I'm sure even just as a blonde woman, like for me as a mixed woman, I am aware of the preferential treatment that I get in the world. I'm aware of the way that I have historically, again, that's changing now, but historically the way that I have been pinpointed as attractive, just based on my blur, not on my physical features. I used to have this experience. I went to an HBCU and I'd be walking by looking so crazy. I'd be running by and somebody would holler at me. I'm like, it's not me. It's the idea of the lighter skin and the curly hair. Like it's that you're attracted to. But if that is my experience over and over again, does that not bleed into my perception when I walk into a room with my Black friends of who's supposed to get attention? Those are things I have to be willing to acknowledge and address with myself and talk about with my friends if I want to have a genuine friendship.
How did you cultivate that self-awareness?
I think just talking and listening.
Yeah, you're very self-aware.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful quality.
You're a very good listener.
I think it genuinely is talking and listening and just being aware how different other people's experiences are.
I think you have a really beautiful, and that sounds cliche, but like you have enough self-love to go there with people where you like aren't afraid. Like, cause you don't make yourself bad. Like you're never afraid to admit that you're wrong. You're never afraid to admit that you've had something misstep. And that shows such a power and self-love and trust in yourself So you can be like, okay, you aren't afraid to get it wrong. You aren't afraid to mess it up. You aren't afraid to like make a mistake. And I feel like so many people are afraid of that.
I didn't know. You know that I
you to shut up! But you can't, because you can never do what you're meant to do. It's not enough for you to fuck up your own life. You have to bring everyone else's down with you. No wonder nobody wants you, Queenie.
Sandra, that...
So my question is, how important is it, maybe this is for you, Yvette, to check your implicit bias before engaging in interracial dynamics?
Interesting. I'd have to know what my implicit bias are, right?
Do you experience implicit bias even just as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman?
I don't know, because most of my friends don't look like me. I don't have, I'm trying to think who's blonde and blue-eyed, but my cousin, like she has green eyes and she's just a wild woman. And so like when we hang out, it's wild. And that's just who she is, and I'm in for the ride. I'm trying to think when like it shows up.
To jump in, you asked if I'm ever, or you know, if I'd ever be afraid that if we get in like an argument or something, those things would come out. And I think for her, genuinely, no. Like I'm trying to think of any time I've ever even felt like she had that kind of bias, and I think genuinely no. But I do feel that with a lot of my other friends who are mixed. And I have friends that I can point out that I know that they think that. You know what I mean? I know that they think that they're a little bit better because they're, you know, light skinned, gray eye, curly haired, you know? And so I think I almost feel that a little bit more within the Black community, or my community of, and I wouldn't say my friend, like all my friends are Black, but with my community of racially ambiguous, you know, biracial, those kinds of friends. And just even thinking about myself, like I think so. I always consider myself on the threshold of being, and it's okay. So I want to say this in a way that I'm expressing it. That's not like, let's see.
Good luck.
I know, like, let's see. I know that there is a perception out there that the darker you are, the more attributes someone is going to ascribe to you in terms of when people are thinking negatively about Black people. I know that there is a bias towards lighter skinned women, women who look mixed, women who have curly hair. I know that there is a big bias out there towards that. And I always think to myself, I'm on the threshold of that, so I never know what end I'm gonna get. And sometimes I'm like, in certain situations, I will actually try my hardest to look at the better end of it, for them, not for me. That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to be careful with the words, but to look a little bit more ambiguous so that I don't have to deal with that. So I think there is an implicit bias there that I have picked up, that while I don't feel like I necessarily believe in, I do subscribe to sometimes, because it's a way of feeling safer.
Yes.
You know, like if I have my hair this lighter color, I may look a little bit more like, you know, mixed with something maybe, and that will save me from the comments, the, you know, the text messages, the chocolate, the whatever. And I do actually find myself playing into that time to time, and I try not to, but sometimes honestly, you gotta live this every day. Some days you just want to break, you know?
Yeah. Between non-ambiguous Black women and ambiguous Black women, and somebody on the cusp of that, but between you and I, for example, as friends, how important would it be to have kinds of conversations like this where you even acknowledge? Because I do think in interracial dynamics that is as apparent as Black and white, you almost can't look away from it, and if you are, it can feel like a genuinely inauthentic relationship. But within the Black community, you might be able to think that you can get away with it, but it still exists just as heavily. So do you think you have to put it on the table, and how do you do that?
I mean, I'm going to be honest, I would love to put it on the table, but I genuinely don't think some of my friends would understand. I don't think, and I think, again, because they are safe in the fact that they are receiving that privilege, who wants to step out of that? Because at the end of the day, we're still all Black, or Black in some way. So we still know what, as we say in Jamaica, what clock a strike. We still know what time it is, you know what I mean? We still know what's going to happen to us. So I think it would be a hard conversation to have. I think it does need to be had, but I think it's a hard conversation to have sometimes just because one might have to take your safety away.
I might add, as a non-white woman, but something I've observed as well that I think afflicts white women is toxic positivity. Everything's good, everything's fine, even when the shit is hitting the fan. And a kind of like conflict aversion. I actually don't want, like, I imagine she didn't want to deal with the fact that she was 30 minutes late. She just would rather not. Maybe that's connected to perfection, or it could be connected just to the idea of like, I don't want to make a scene. I don't want to, you know. When I think, you know, conflict and tension really produce growth. So like if we can, I also was raised by an attorney. So all I did was debate. And I believe that that is how I show love. So if I'm not arguing with you.
I was raised to make a scene.
I'm also an immigrant. So like we turn up on Tuesday. But there are cultural elements of it too. And sometimes I find myself like, girl, you don't have to be positive. This shit is bad. I need you to know. We don't need to pretend like this is going to be, you know, okay. Not that Black folks and others don't experience that, but I've noticed it sort of more as a
there's a whiteness of like not acknowledging the truth or reality, or like, because then it would change the status quo.
Rich, pour Queenie some more wine.
Oh, no.
It's fine.
Not pregnant, are you?
No, what? No. What? No, I'm not. No, I'm not pregnant.
If you two had children, I have to admit, they would be lovely. Colour of milky coffee. And if we're in luck, they'll have your eyes, Queenie, which are just gorgeous, all those lashes. But they'd get Tom's lovely straight nose.
It's a bit unexpected.
What do you mean a miscarriage?
It is rare, but unfortunately it does happen. Adam, why don't you go and get the cake?
Nose like his granddad. Oh, it would be nice for something of ours to be passed on, given the baby will be half-caste. Granddad had such a...
The same way that you had to go through the work and I had to go through the work of combating these racist ideals, do you have to take it upon yourself to educate your family too? Like, is that also work that you take on to ensure that you're, just like the same way you wouldn't invite her to a place or a party that was harmful to her, you won't invite her to a home that you also know hasn't been prepped and like cleared the same way.
No, I think it does fall on the friend, on the boyfriend, whoever the partner. I think it could also fall in like, look, I wouldn't put you, even like conversations have been had, I've, you know, set my boundary or spoken my piece about how I feel about them feeling a certain way when it comes to race, politics, whatever, but it's also like, I guess there is something of like, so I truly won't bring you around that. Like, I don't know, even coming to this dinner, it's not that like, okay, like we're done here, like I've tried, it's over, but like...
But if you don't bring them, then they never meet your family.
Well, I wonder, that's kind of what I'm wondering is like, is it so awful and ridiculous to maybe have these dinners over and over? Is it a point of like, you choose kind of, like you separate?
I think it's ridiculous to keep having these dinners over and over and him not speak up, you know, to his family. If he needs to continuously, you know, he's like, he needs to continuously speak up on those issues and educate them. And if they're not accepting it, I mean, hopefully, you know, he can break it down. But, you know, I think he needs to put in a little more work to get the message across to them. And it goes back to what we were talking about, like having those uncomfortable conversations, that not only with your partner, but like with your loved ones, your family as well.
I feel like what you said is the answer though, that you just have to devote yourself to, if you're going to expose people to your family, to putting your family through the work that you had to go through. And it takes time, and it may not be as fast because they're older and they have less indoctrination in those communities and less motivation, but then you have to also make the stakes high.
That thing of we will leave if you're talking this way. We will not come back. Why would we be here?
And I love that comment too of like, yes, I saw that you looked uncomfortable, but that uncomfortable look is not enough.
Right. Yeah.
Like requires something more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well-
and waiting for her to pass on is we can't wait for that, okay?
Right.
We need the change to start gradually happening now.
Yeah, she had a really good physical this year.
Going to meet my fiance's parents 3 years ago, there was an ongoing joke with my family who is very of mixed background, black, white, Asian. We all made get out jokes. And I mean, you laugh at it now, but I could see on my man's face at the time before we were fiancés. He was a little uncomfortable, but he got it too because, again, I was going to backwoods Indiana, middle of nowhere, all white family, bringing over your black girlfriend. No one knew I was black except for his mom, his sister-in-law, and his brother. Everybody else didn't really know. It's like, I didn't think I needed to bring it up as a thing. And I kindly asked him, I was like, why not though? And he's like, I don't know. I don't think my family is in that type of manner where race matters, but there are unfortunately people who make race such a big issue of, okay, what are the babies gonna look like? And I'm like,
you know what's crazy about even that story is that like you're rolling the dice on your comfort, right? He's like, I don't think my family is like that. Acknowledging historically, probably the vast majority of white families are going to be like that just because of the times they grew up in. But because it's uncomfortable for you to have that conversation with your family, you're rolling the dice and saying, I don't think I have to say it. But the fact that you don't want to say it is probably more indicative of why you should.
I've actually had an experience with my most recent ex who was black, and I told him, like, you're gonna come meet my family and everything, and his question first was like, are they gonna be okay with the fact that I'm black? And I asked him the same. I said, is your family gonna be okay with the fact that I'm white? Because you just never know. And I didn't get to meet his family, but he did have that question for me, and I said, they want me to be happy, so whatever I choose, they're fine with, but I can't promise you that they won't say anything out of pocket just because they're not even from this country. So they are from Russia, you know what I mean? Like, they're old school. And I was like, if they say something, I promise they don't mean any harm, but I can't control what comes out of their mouth, so you're gonna have to bear with it, you know? And he was very much like, okay, as long as they're like respectful and kind, that's all that matters. And like, it went really, really, really well, and they didn't say anything out of pocket, which is great. But I always have that fear that they might say something just because they don't know. They're naive to it. They're not like used to it. And every single person in my family so far is white. Everyone. There's not one person that has dated or married outside of our race. And I'm the first person that's actually brought somebody home that isn't white or speaks Russian. Like, honestly, it's that crazy. So I was just like, look, I don't know what's gonna happen, but I'm pretty sure it'll be okay. So it wasn't like that, but it could have been, you know, and I'm just glad it wasn't.
That's what we feared. We definitely feared that. Like, my dad even was like, hey, you good? You good meeting the family? Is he good with, you know, you meeting the family? And we had that discussion. It was nice. But yeah, when you put it into perspective, it's kind of scary when you meet your significant other or others' parents and they don't have the same background as you, whether it's financial or racial. There's always that what if factor. But I also encourage couples and even friends to kind of like have the chat, just like we have the chat, unfortunately, as Black people driving around and getting pulled over, you have the talk. And it's nice that I'm able to like tell you as my friend what that talk is. Or, you know, if I have to act a certain way in crowds because I don't know what the atmosphere is going to be like, you know, singling me out as the Black friend in a predominant white space. But I feel like even in relations too, those uncomfortable conversations do have to be had. And I hate to say like in preparation, but they do need to be had.
Yeah, I think that's an important note. I wonder how that sits, because I think that even in this case with Tom, right? He has a belief. He says leave it because he looks at his grandma as fixed. His family is fixed. They feel how they're going to feel, and that's not going to change. But I think we know from our own experiences you can change, and your perspective can change, and you can become anti-racist. So do you think that these are conversations you would have with your family?
Oh, absolutely. I think now that they see that it's a possibility that somebody will enter their life forever, like as if I do find a partner who ends up being Black, or any other race, that it's going to be something that they're going to have to learn. They're going to have to learn about the difference of culture, and they're not used to that. So I have already had like different kinds of conversations with them, and I feel like they're easing into it, and when they verbalize it to me, they always just say, as long as you're happy, we're happy. Like, we don't care. Deep down, do I know if they like actually care? You know what I mean? Like, they might actually prefer me to be with a white Jewish man because that's what we are and that's what they can relate to. But they're gonna have to learn potentially to relate to somebody else. And I think it's a really good opportunity for conversations like that to happen, and for them to learn and for me to learn. So I think it's awesome.
And even I remember one of your cousins at one of your parties that came up to me, and it wasn't like an offensive comment, but she came and she's like, "Oh, I'm the whitest person in here," or something like really, you know. And I had no problem saying to her, like, "Why does your cousin feel so comfortable coming up to me? I was a black woman," and sharing, you know, like sharing that. And again, it wasn't offensive, but like, you know, being able to just say something to her in that moment, rather than now me feeling like, oh, I don't want to go around her family anymore because her cousin might say something. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know where it's going after that, you know? So that's what it brings up for me is, again, that feeling of safety. Like, how can you be in a relationship with someone interracially and they not understand and you not have these conversations? Like, how horrible that must feel. And then when you finally do burst, you're ghetto, you're, you know, she doesn't have any class, who are her parents, how was she raised, like that's what you get called. Or if it's another side of it, you get called crazy or angry. Or, you know, I'm sure at some point someone's gonna, you know, what did you say, always making a mess, you know? So that's what that kind of brings up for me.
I think there's so many things that come up for me. One, there's a family member, friend, and twice to Chris and a previous boyfriend, he has said to them, "Oh, I'm from Compton. I was born in Compton." He's a white man, and I'm like, here we go, white flight at its finest. Let's roll the dice. And I'm like, why does he think that that's the connection point? You know? And I'm like, oh, cringing inside. And then afterwards, I'm like, I'm sorry, like, that was not okay. And like,
the question I have, I guess, is because in this case, this kind of goes back to the story you told about your Mexican friend. Is a part of the work also not just apologizing for his behalf, but actually correcting him in front of everybody or afterwards so he understands why that's not okay?
yeah, no, that's a great question. So he's a family member friend. So he's, I think he's they're so far down the rabbit hole. Like, I don't know, like, if it would do us justice or if it would resonate, but I should like test the waters and be like, you know, when you say that, this is what it comes across as, and this is what it actually is.
Him putting her in that situation without the care is pretty brutal. Not taking care of her like the family, like setting up the situation in an appropriate way or a helpful way is like cruel, you know, to think about. Like, if you know your family enough to know that something could go sideways or she even starts, that's when you step in. Like, if you love someone, if you care someone, like, she has no other reaction but to do that kind of thing, to leave, to freak out. Like, there's a protector part of you that comes forward and is like, oh, fuck this. No one's gonna save me. Okay, I have to save myself, you know? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that...
What do you think what he should have done?
I mean, it's the thing that is the hardest thing to do, which is to stand up.
Yes.
For racism.
Yeah.
And stand out against your family in that moment. And sometimes that is more valuable than pretending it doesn't even exist in your family.
Totally.
Right? Like, actively, I think it feels more safe if somebody acknowledges that there's unsafeties and I'm willing to stand up for you and I'm going to show you how I'll protect you within those environments, rather than trying to pretend that we're the mystical one white family that intergenerationally is completely accepting and has completely removed themselves from all of that anti-blackness conditioning. So, I don't know. I'm curious, though.
So you said something that I think needs to be emphasized, setting the table. So before she even pulls up to the dinner or whatever, I think it's incumbent upon the boyfriend or whoever is inviting you into the family to talk to every family member. I promise you, if you're on your bullshit, I'm getting up and leaving. I've heard you made these comments before, so I'm not making this out of, you know, you want to be loving with your loved ones, but you also want to say, I've noticed a pattern. I've seen you in private spaces. I've seen you in mixed spaces. I want you to be clear, we're not going to allow that. And if you do, these are the consequences. And I'm saying this also from my own experience, which is bizarre because I am married to a Black man, and my Ethiopian family says wild shit about slavery all the time. I don't know what it is. I think they're just so proud of being never colonized or decolonized that they constantly are making comments that are completely inappropriate. And I've sat down with relatives, particularly around Christmas. I don't know what it is about Christmas that brings out these wild comments, that if you make reference to this or somehow try to make a connection to my husband by using these comments, my children, all of us are getting up and leaving. And it will be in a, you know, loud fashion. I want you to know we're leaving. I want you to know that I don't accept this. And I want my children to see this because I want them to know these are our values. We don't accept this way of being and working. And like, you'll see the relationship limit. I may not come to the next Christmas. I may, like, there are consequences, and I think it's about exacting them in loving ways, but it's not a zero tolerance, but it is an invitation to behave a certain way around me or my partner or whomever. Alternatively, I've also been in other relationships sitting there where my, you know, the partner's family is talking crazy to me. Again, also Black people. So to be clear, like, you can harbor these experiences and feelings and still be Black, and they did nothing. And I think there is this assumption that Black women can stand up for themselves, that they are, you know, they're strong and that they speak out. But I also don't want to your point, abandon myself. Like, my culture, my heritage is you don't talk back to elders.
This is what I'm at the Daily Reader to do. I'm gonna change the world. But not today.
I had an incident earlier this year where a man walked up to me, started screaming. He said, F Black people, and he spat in my face. And that this was at work. Not in the workplace. I was out doing a story, but basically, and it was live on camera, so lots of people could see it. And that's one of the experiences where, kind of similar to this, I feel like I had to, first I tried to, I guess, cancel out the, you know, F Black people part. Because if you didn't say F Black people, then it was just like a random attack, right? So it's not, but when you realize that that's real, and then you kind of have to explain to people why that is the part that makes you afraid, not the spitting in your face part, not the 6'4" man up, you know, close to you part, the actual part where he did it because you're Black. And then having to explain that to people while you're trying to heal from that, which is similar to this. You're trying to explain to people, you know, why this cause matters while living in it. So she's Black and she's living in it, but having to explain to other people why it matters. And usually that's a room full of white people. It's always a room full of white people that you're having to explain that to. And so, I mean, I don't know what she does next in this, but I find for me, a lot of the time, you know, I try to bury it. I try to just keep it to myself because it's not going to interrupt work. It's going to interrupt the way I think about myself. It's going to interrupt if I want to get out of the car, if I see somebody that's threatening. It's going to interrupt my friendships. It's, you know, going to interrupt everything if I don't put it away. But I think the hardest part is trying to explain yourself to people about why that hurt so much. And I remember that's one of the times where I told her, I think I just sent you the video.
You sent me the video.
I just sent her the video, like blind, like, here you go. And she was like, that's assault. She's like, that's hate. That's what I was talking about earlier, you know, and said that back to me, like, you need to acknowledge that this happened to you because you have to start healing from it, you know, and I think it's important to have mirrors like that, but most of the time as a Black woman, you don't. You just have a room full of white people where you're trying to explain yourself.
That is terrible. I'm so sorry that happened to you.
No, I mean, I was going to say it's okay, but one of the things I keep saying is that it's okay, and everybody's like, you know, she's like, it's not. And it's not. That's the truth, is that, you know, how else do you survive these things? And it's like, you know, I have one Yvette, but there's lots of Black girls that go through this that don't have an Yvette.
when we're put into these spaces that aren't diverse, that we know that have people in leadership who are not open to supporting, showing their support, or not even willing to understand our point of view and what we're feeling and what we're going through, it's frustrating, and it's just a lot. It's heavy. You feel like you don't have anyone to talk to about certain issues and your experience in those environments.
How important is it to have an angry white friend?
What a question. Down for the call. Are you an angry white friend, Juliette?
Yes, I'm the meanest, most angry person you'll meet. Yes.
I mean, do we want to call it the angry white friend though? Or just someone who is like very passionate or down for the cause, you know? Who's not afraid to speak up and speak out if, you know, if her best friend was in that in the boardroom.
Ballroom dance.
If her friend was in the boardroom with her during that pitch meeting, like, would she have spoken up?
Have you been in a workplace and a Black woman or Black person suggested, outside of an ERG, employee resource group, suggested that you focus on Black issues on any particular topic?
No. I've never been in a work environment where you had that. I got out of the corporate world, like, I don't know what year it was, but I was in Chicago and in New York, and it was like, it still wasn't, in the industry that I was in, it still wasn't super diverse.
Yeah.
So I don't remember anything like that, but I can imagine if I was in that same environment at this point in time or during Black Lives Matter, that would be something that would happen, for sure.
Yeah.
What was your experience of when Black Lives Matter happened, being in a corporate world?
I actually was running decolonized design then, and so it was a very different experience.
Yeah.
Companies were coming to us, particularly because we were a Black-led organization, and we were very clear about our values. But in recent roles, I certainly have experienced the All Lives Matter, somehow focusing on non-white people is an attack on whiteness, which I only learned in these workplaces. I think that there's, some kind of belief system that says if whiteness is not the center, if it's not the default, then we have to be vigilant and protect it. And she talked about the Women's March. And so, I was in complete support of I didn't go in DC, but that was obviously a very important political and social moment for me. And yet you don't see some of those same people at Black Lives Matter. That mirrors the experience that many Black women have with feminism. Does it really, are we a part of it, Are we being non-white folks? Are we, and that's really the whole spectrum. Like when we say women, who are we talking about? All of those questions, there's a kind of white heteronormativity dominant culture that rules the workplace and the world. And from my experience, anytime, I can give you a recent example. I work in the environmental movement. If I talk about environmental racism, in other words, the experiences of people who live near factories or who live, in the hood and they have polluted water. Flint, Michigan, great example, still doesn't have clean water. I am routinely told we don't do social justice. We are about the environment. How is that not the environment? These are people what we're saying is these are people we don't care about, and they are not a part of the planet we are trying to save. And so in subtle ways, in our policy choices and all kinds of those kinds of choices, and in very direct ways, we're not doing the Black Lives. We're not covering it. We're not addressing it. Just communicates to us that our issues are our issues. And maybe we don't. A question I'm grappling with is, do we go to the workplace to solve these issues?
Me stands a tall back against the wall, and now she start climb up on me. It's kinda like a tricky, I'm checking out Nicky, but you know the time is up on me.
I think Granddad's waved. I think I mixed punch labels. Patrick, off the music. Disconnect you. Get around. Speech time.
So, as we all know, we're gathered here today.
No wedding, Mom.
Hush, Diana. Anyway, before I start, has anyone got anything they'd like to say to our dear Queenie?
I'd like to say something, and I have a gift for you. Wilfred, bring the bag. Open it.
I find code switching to be the most pernicious, harmful, as subtle as it may be, the most harmful way we lose a part of our humanity, particularly as Black people, because it means we already know that like whiteness is the center of this society. That is the center. And it means that we have to abandon a part of ourselves so that we can assimilate, so we can make ourselves, palatable and easy for people to understand. But then when we go back to our way of being and use our language and the things we like to do, it's somehow foreign to the same people. And to me, that just communicates like, you don't have proximity to us. Because if you knew Black folk, you would have heard this. This is British. They say isn't it? They say other things that like, if you are in the neighborhood, if you are around folks, it's obvious. And I personally find that in workplaces in particular, but in the world generally, it's constantly a translation of like, how do I keep my survival in this environment? What do I need to say to either communicate I'm smart, to communicate I'm capable, right? I can't just say it in my natural way. Because, you quickly get stereotyped.
If I'm around people who are using vocabulary that I don't understand because the words are too big, oftentimes, one, I'm too embarrassed to say, explain that to me and stop that person. And I'm definitely not going to say, hey, can you switch your language so that it suits my level of comprehension? I'm probably going to spend my free time to go and look that up, educate myself so that I can communicate better with that person, especially if it's somebody that I want to impress. Or someone who I care about communicating with. And if I don't do those things, that indicates to me that I really don't care.
I think it's so interesting too when you're talking about code switching too, like, because it's like code switching in the workplace. And then even if you have to do that in relationships, it's like you're giving yourself the subconscious message that you have to be different to be loved, or you have to be different to make money. And it's like that type of experience is so eroding to the self. And it's so just like harmful to like people being able to be who they are, and like to have that your whole life is just, it's a lot. It's really hard.
And I do think there's a fine line between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation. So learning about people's culture, I think squarely fits in appreciation. When you start using the things out of context and, taking it on as your own without any, real relationship with people, I think that can get harmful.
I luckily have had Black friends through my life who have no issue with saying like, hey, if white people act this way, if you act this way, if there's like, this is what Blacks, we've heard Black sent, like, or like these people have done it, like, that's not cool. Like, for sure, I think it's like really hard to not have to have some kind of conversation like that, probably as a Black person, especially like, I grew up like in a predominantly white neighborhood, so I bring things with me that I might not even be conscious of, and luckily now I live in LA and I like have a lot of different kinds of friends. It's wonderful. But yeah, I think it is something that like you have to actually, when people are like put in the work, it really is work, and it's not overnight or anything, but it should feel really clear, especially if you are friends or have a relationship with someone like a white friend, Black friend. And as the white friend, you're like, this is like special and precious, and there's a lot working in the world against her, against our friendship that could go, south, that could turn into Cassandra and Queenie. And, you can absolutely combat that and stop that before it spirals out of control. I definitely am aware of any anti-Blackness I've been exposed to that's been ingrained in me just simply because that's how our world works and this country, so yeah.
Friendships by nature of it is like, be yourself, girl. Like, let your hair down, relax. In your experiences, do you think in interracial friendships there is still code switching that has to happen or does happen?
So I'm curious your experience, but I think for the women in my life, the Black women that I'm close with, it just takes longer for them to develop the trust with me. And I wouldn't probably say that they probably feel like there might be still a part of them that they feel like they have to hide or they feel like that they can't be. And I just have to respect and honor that, because it's really my job to continue to build rapport and build safety and be a place where they can be themselves as much as possible. And maybe they don't feel like they can be themselves all the time. Like,
yeah, I would add that I think, 20-year-old Ida would say something very different than today. Today, my friendships with white women have been unusually authentic in that I come as my full self, as long as I'm not subtly asked to assimilate or accept good intentions, from folks and really kind of compromise. As long as I don't have to compromise, I feel free to bring my full humanity. And I hope, my white, siblings feel that same invitation to do that. And I've really learned, especially from my white friends, like, they're actually of Irish heritage. They have these different ancestries that they're proud of that often gets, sort of mushed together as the, like, I am American or I am white, but there's so much more depth to their heritage that I hope that there's space for everyone to bring that rather than, focus on what is my experience as a Black woman, how bad it is. I actually love being a Black woman. It's amazing. I wouldn't be anything else. I just want that to go on the record. And I hope people feel that same way, whatever their heritage is.